It is that time now once again, for getting lumped up with my friends. It's RockerMike and Rob that you should know, and you'll find them here on the Rockshow. Ooh, yeah, on the Rockshow.
Hello, people, and we did it 150 rock shows, and this one might be the biggest show of them all. We have a very special Black History, and we got the making of Bitches Brew by Mr. Miles Davis. So,
Right.
Mike, what you got for me?
Well, this is the 27th album.
I couldn't
Came out in
believe that.
1970. Okay, so in maybe like a 15-year period, he put out 27 albums.
It's crazy.
That's amazing, right? Okay. His best selling, I believe, and it really changed the way jazz music was looked at when it came to, the rock and roll world. Okay. Because it was really a combination of electrified instruments, which is something he only had just started doing on his prior record.
Yep.
And a lot of people were turned off by it too. He kind of, Bob Dylan has often said, like there's the story when he went electric at the folk festival in '65 that people were throwing shit at him and booing him, and he lost a lot of fans because he wasn't staying acoustic. Kind of happened to Miles Davis a little bit as well. Okay. A lot of people didn't want to see this fusion of, rock musicians into the jazz world. But Miles, he did it, he just took it to that other level, he really did. Like I said, it came out on March 30th, 1970 on Columbia Records. It's a double record.
Yep.
And, prior to this album was an album called In a Silent Way that came out a year earlier in '69. And he started having electric piano. He started having electric guitar, electric bass mixed in there with his trumpet playing. And it was different. It was a fusion. Okay, what they call jazz fusion. All right. But they didn't have a name for it back then. It just was something out there that Miles was doing,
Yeah.
And it was totally different in a silent way, and then continuing on with Bitches Brew. It was a totally different way of recording jazz, different rhythms, different time signatures. It was much more of a loose rock influenced kind of recording. I'll get into some of that a little bit, what I mean by that. But I mean, you do you listen to Miles Davis at all, Rob? You into any jazz?
Yeah,
Or?
I listen to a little bit, but if I listen to him, Miles Davis would probably be the one, because he was just like so smooth. His music coming out of that, he was great.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
the thing that he did with this album, he incorporated so much stuff that you're like, what the fuck? It's so good. There's so many sounds, and the electric guitar, electric piano, and I can see why people lost their shit.
Yeah, well, it was for years it was it took a while to go gold. I'll talk about that. It took even longer to go platinum. I don't think it went platinum until the 21st century. Okay,
Yeah, I think it went platinum in. I actually got a date. If you want to know it.
Yeah, I got it too. We can get to it.
Yeah, it did go platinum, like certified. Like you got a certificate and everything.
Yeah, but he's now it was like 30 years after his death or 20 years after his death, something like that. Miles was a cool guy.
Oh yeah, it was in 1990, 2003. The album was certified platinum.
2003, so it was like 10 years basically after
his death. 1 million copies. Yep.
And I always, this is the Miles Davis record I go to. Bertha Cool, Kind of Blue, all that is great. But I kind of like this period with him the best. I think it's the most interesting. And it was he was taking a chance because, his career was okay. It was doing well, but what was happening was the music industry was changing. In the late 60s, everything was these, long-haired rock bands. And some of the black jazz musicians didn't like this. It was just taking away too much. They were kind of incorporating some jazz influenced stuff into their music as rock bands. And people that were in jazz were saying, hey, why are we letting these long-haired bands take our shit? Okay. So Miles was one of those people, he heard what was going on in rock music. He was very in tune. He loved Hendrix and stuff like that. And, but he was like, well, why can't I make a record with rock influences, and that's really what he did. Now, originally the album got mixed responses when it came out, but over the years it would gain a lot of momentum and eventually became his highest charting album. It got to number 35 in 1971. Okay. It won a Grammy for Best Large Jazz Ensemble Album. And in 1976, it would go gold. And like you said, in 2003, it would go platinum. So here's the history here. Basically, by 69, Miles Davis's core working band consisted of Wayne Shorter on soprano sax, Dave Holland on bass, Chick Corea on electric piano, and Jack DeJohnette on drums. The group, minus DeJohnette, recorded In a Silent Way, which was also featured a guy named Joe Zawinul, John Mclaughlin, Tony Williams, and Herbie Hancock played on that record. The album marked who would go on to, all that stuff in the 80s that he did. He still makes records, I believe. The album marked the first time that, be considered his electric period. Okay. It incorporated the electric piano, guitar, jazz fusion styles, but this was in a certain way, in a silent way. But then after that album came out, he said, I want to take this further. And that would be the Bitches Brew record. What he did was, for touring In a Silent Way in 69, he had his 5-piece band get together, and they worked on some early demos for what would be songs on Bitches Brew, and they took it out on tour and played it on some of these shows for In a Silent Way that they did. Early versions of what became Miles Runs the Voodoo Down. That's the name of a song. Sanctuary, Spanish Key. Okay. They were all played on that tour in 69. And at this point in his career, Miles was definitely influenced by rock and particularly funk music.
Oh, okay. Very influenced.
Right. Joe Zawinul, he played with something called Cannonball Adderley. Okay. Cannonball Adderley was a famous alto sax player. Okay. And the work of English composer Paul Buckmaster. A lot of that stuff was out there, and Miles was listening to it, and he was taking it all in and kind of turning it into this new type of jazz fusion that would come out with Bitches Brew, really. Okay. In August of 69, and I find this interesting because it's right around the time I was born. August 1969, Miles got his band together for some booked recording sessions. The 5-piece was there, okay, that he had, as well as Joe Zawinul, John Mclaughlin, Larry Young, Lenny White, Don Alias, Juna Santos, and Benny Maupin, okay, all featured on this album. Miles had written some simple chord lines, and at first, he had 3 pianos, okay, which he kind of expanded into a sketch of a larger composition. In other words, he was coming up with like the core stuff, but it was very loose. There was ability to change things, and that's how he did. He would come up with a basis to work with, and everybody kind of built on it. He told them they could play anything that came to mind. that they wanted, as long as they play off his one chosen chord. Okay, which is not easy to do. Okay,
You're
asking some. He's saying, okay, you can only take it so far, but stay within this region. Now, he had no arrangements really for each of these players. Okay, but
that's incredible.
Yeah, but he basically within this, it was improvisational, absolutely. Okay, because Miles was against what he called prearranged shit. All right. He didn't like, he was more like, let the guys play, but within boundaries. Okay. But some jazz musicians would have everything hammered out for you.
Yeah.
The way you were supposed to play. And that was the only thing you could do. He allowed for a lot of improvisation, which has made him so unique. What he did was he booked Columbia's Columbia Records Studio B in New York City from August 19th through the 21st.
This album like in 4 days.
In like 3 days. Yeah, all live. Okay. The session on the 19th started at 10 a.m. and the band was attempting at first to do the title track, Bitches Brew. All right. Everyone was set up in a half circle, okay, with Miles and Wayne Shorter next to each other in the middle. And it was a 3-day live recording. Okay. Not one overdub.
Wow. That's impressive.
So what you hear is what you get. That's it. Okay. And I don't, I love albums that are raw like this, whether it's a rock album or, a jazz album, whatever, because you can really see how it all comes together. And Miles always said, there's no wrong chord. There's no wrong note. In other words, there's no wrong note that you could play. The only wrong note you play is the next note. Okay. It's just like everything is improvisational. All right. And that was the beauty of his music, especially Bitches Brew, because it's probably one of the loosest jazz records you'll ever hear, and I think it was very influential coming out in 1970 to, bands like the MC5 and other. Later on in the 70s, you had a lot of jazz influenced rock bands like Steely Dan and things like that. I'm not really into them that much, but I respect them for being great musicians, and they point to jazz as, a definite influence. All right. As was usual in a lot of Davis recording sessions, tracks were recorded in sections, small sections. And he would give few instructions while playing. Sometimes he would give a tempo count. He would, a few chords. Okay. There'd be a hint of a melody he would give them. Sometimes it was just basically suggestions on the mood they were supposed to be in or whatever tone they were supposed to be playing, but again, very improvisational. Now, Davis worked this way intentionally because he felt it forced the musicians to pay close attention to each other,
okay,
and also to themselves. Okay, what would happen is, even though it's again in the looseness, he could change his mind quickly and go in another way, and you had to follow him. So in this process, he was basically like, it allowed everybody to pay attention to each other, to themselves, and to him. That's the way he saw it. I don't know. Okay, some people found it difficult to work with Miles Davis. Some found it easy. It just depends, on how you.
There's some people that do want leadership. Be like, oh, why improv? How you want to play or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, it had to be an experience to play with the guy. By that point, he was a fucking living legend.
And people would probably geek it out anyway.
Yeah, be an honor. Now, on the quieter moments of Bitches Brew, where it's a little quieter, more mellow, you can actually hear Miles' voice. You can hear him like giving instructions. Okay. You can sometimes hear him snapping his fingers. Okay, just very light in the background because this was all recorded live, exactly as it was. No overdubs.
Wow.
They didn't take out anything. They didn't add anything. Nothing. All right, it's exactly as it was recorded. At one point, you could hear him saying, "Keep it tight, keep it tight." You know, what he would do too, and you could hear it on Bitches Brew. If somebody had a solo, you know, he would call their name right before they started doing their solo. So
pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, totally live in the studio. I think that was the genius of this record. Okay. There was a track called John Mclaughlin. Of course, there was a musician, but there was an actual track named after him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another one called Sanctuary. Those were put down on the August 19th sessions on the first day. They started working. They were working on Bitches Brew, but it didn't get totally recorded that day. Mclaughlin and Sanctuary were the two that were done. And then Pharaoh's Dance was also rehearsed on, which is the opening track, to the album. Now, despite his reputation as cool and a melodic improviser, much of Miles Davis's playing on this album is really aggressive. Okay, it's not anything he had done before. Okay, you could say it's also explosive. I mean, his trumpet just pops. All right, and he also would kind of he was taking the trumpet playing to higher heights. The notes were actually a lot in a higher register than he had done in the past. You know, the opening of Bitches Brew. When it's just you hear the echoes of the trumpet. It was at like a very high register, and he was really pushing himself, I think, as a musician to do this. Yeah. So the closing solo on Miles Runs the Voodoo Down is particularly noteworthy in that regard as well, with the high notes. He didn't play, however, on the song John Mclaughlin. He's not on that. Okay, it's everybody else. Now, if you're wondering how he came up with the name, Bitches Brew, okay, it's basically a reference to like all the women in his life. Okay, and he had many. Okay, I believe Cicely Tyson was in his life at this time, and a bunch of other women. Miles got around, but what was happening was these women were, showing him the cultural changes that were happening in the 60s. So these women around him were very influential in shaping this record and shaping his outlook. Okay. There's a great Netflix documentary out there right now called Miles Davis, The Birth of Cool. Okay. And it's the story of his life. And everybody, take an hour and a half to see this. It's a great documentary. Came out, I think it was this year or last year. I think it's pretty recent. They interview a lot of people that played with him. Sadly, Miles has been gone now since the early '90s. But
he had a while now.
He had a hard life, man. He had a hard life. There was drug addiction, cocaine, heroin and cocaine addiction at points in his career. But he represented, especially around this time and into the early 70s, just like a badass dude. He had all the cars, he had all the clothes, he had all the women, he had, everybody wanted to be like him,
so cool.
Yeah. And he just looked badass. He had like that kind of longish hair with the sunglasses and, every word out of his mouth was motherfucker. He was like a jazz playing Samuel Jackson,
Yeah,
I think he's fuck, and I wish I could have seen him in his time. Now the post-production of this record is very interesting. There was a lot of new techniques that were really done for the first time, almost with this record, as far as jazz. Okay. The producer's name was Teo Macero, okay? And he almost used the recording studio like a musical instrument himself.
Wow.
Okay. The many short edits that the way they recorded it was in a lot of short sections. Okay. They would be put together into longer sections. All right. And then he would add studio effects to it, like things like tape loops, okay, tape delays, echoes, okay, like again in Bitches Brew, the title track, when you hear his trumpet kick in and all the echoes, it sounds like his trumpet is bouncing off buildings in Manhattan. Boom, boom, like, like a big echo,
Yeah.
from one side to the other. And never really was done before in jazz. And so it really was groundbreaking. They said, we're going to, and I kind of think, I'm going to go so far to say that he had to be looking at Phil Spector as an influence.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this Teo Macero guy.
The wall of sound.
Right. Well, not right. Well, not like
He didn't do the
they
wall
would
of sound,
use. They were using. They were using two basses sometimes, three guitars, 2 to 3 drummers at one time. So it was almost like a wall of sound, like you say, Rob. I think that in a sense, that's really what they were doing. And the rhythm sections of the band, the drum and the bass, was given center role on this album, which was not common on jazz. That's more of a rock thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Drums featuring exclusively. It really hadn't been done, and some people were put off by it. They didn't like that rock influence. But
it was like a rock jazz album almost.
Combination.
It was good. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
It sounded right.
We hear it now 50 years later, and it's great. But back then it was like, whoa, what the fuck is Miles doing?
It was innovative too. It was very innovative.
Yeah. Now, the technology of recording, like analog tapes and disc mastering and inherent recording time constraints, by that time in the late 60s, that had expanded. In other words, the technology was really starting to be there to do a lot more. And he took advantage of that with this album. There had been a lot of limitations in the past. I don't think tape loops were commonly used until like Hendrix was using them, and that was the late 60s. It had been done in the past, but like very rarely, and not most people didn't know how to do it. Okay, so the Beatles kind of started doing it on Revolver. Okay, there were tape loops on that. Sgt. Pepper. So that's 67. Jimi Hendrix was doing it in 66, 67. So it was that era. Now, one cool thing about the record, it's kind of a lost concept now, but it did come out in what was called Quadraphonic Sound. And it was issued a year later in 1971 in that way. Okay, now what was Quadraphonic Sound? Stereo was 2 channels. Okay, you had 2 channels, left and right together. That's stereo. But what they did in the 70s is they had the ability to expand that for the first time into 4 speakers.
Wow.
All right. So records sometimes came out in quadraphonic sound. They were recorded that way. Okay. Another feature we talked about, if you remember, like the binaural quadraphonic sound.
Yeah.
Remember Lou Reed was doing that on Street Hassle? And they actually had people. He would record live, and they had microphones in these dummy heads. Remember we were talking about that? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a very different way of recording to get like a perfect live sound. And when Bitches Brew came out years later, like a complete box set of all the recordings, they actually included the regular stereo version and the quadraphonic version. So if you have a chance to hear the quadraphonic, it's pretty wild. But you got to have 4 speakers set up.
4 speakers. You
get that different sound. Because, like I said, the opening to Bitches Brew with all the trumpets sounding like they're bouncing around, you hear it in different different speakers. So it's kind of cool. groundbreaking the album was, absolutely. I think we've showed that. But it was also kind of known as chill out music. It was something that people picked up on to kind of chill out, smoke a joint, have a drink, listen to Miles, chill out, have sex, whatever. Okay. It was chill out music. And for years, that's what people listened to this as, and it didn't just attract jazz fans. It attracted other people. Okay. Now, Rolling Stone magazine has called this the number 94 album of the list of 500 greatest albums.
Wow.
Yeah, it's up there. Okay. And there's also a book called The 1001 Albums That You Must Hear Before You Die. That's one of them.
One of them.
Yeah. Now, many 70s rock bands definitely were influenced by this. Anybody that had a jazz influence. Okay. But there's some modern day bands that have, latched on to this, like Radiohead. The guys in Radiohead like love this album. And also there was a Canadian band, punk band, in the 90s. Do you remember them called No Means No? No Means No?
I remember No Means. You put something up about
I did post, not too long ago. I did make that a song of the day. They actually covered the title track, Bitches Brew. So you got this like punk band, okay? And there you go. Me a little Bitches Brew thrown on.
A little Bitches Brew.
And what they did, a lot of No Means No fans, from what I understand, didn't like this. I kind of think it was cool. They covered it with guitars, no trumpets, nothing like, no jazz instruments. They used guitars and drums and everything, and even that echoing sound, they used it with guitars. And instead of being like a 26-minute long album side like it was, it's like about 15 minutes long, which is still pretty long for a rock, a punk band. And they actually had the courage, I would say. Some might say nerve, but I would say courage to put lyrics to it. Wow. And the lyrics are like spoken kind of, and it's about like this violently drunk Miles Davis fan. All right, it's just like wow, okay, you took it to a different level now,
That's pretty cool that it can do that.
I think it's cool. I think you can go back and listen to it. No Means No version of Bitches Brew. So that's all I got for you today, Rob. That's Bitches Brew. It's our 150th show.
Yeah, can you believe that?
And you're celebrating. All right, man.
150. Ooh, I'm gonna be stoned like a motherfucker.
That's gonna be me. That's gonna be me later on tonight.
Oh man.
So
can you believe 150?
Yeah. And I want to thank all the fans, of course, everybody that's watched the shows and subscribed to the podcast and pushed us to where we are. Couldn't have done it without any of you. So I really appreciate that. And always keep in touch. You got ideas, you got anything you want to talk about, let me know. You guys know how to get me. I'll put all my social handles on in a bit. And, Rob, got to thank you too. I couldn't have done it without you.
Yep.
And, you all the, Rob's the technical genius of the show.
And the technology is not that good.
Hey, we're pretty good. Two guys with faces made for radio.
Yeah. But we do good. And people listen. Sometimes I get shocked by the views we get on some stuff. We get pretty amazing. I'm like, what the hell? Who's watching? But people are watching. People are listening.
I think we've succeeded in what we set out to accomplish in the beginning, which was basically two guys in a bar, bullshitting about music. And we're not always together when we do the shows, but it's still two guys bullshitting about bands, and I've made it a point to talk about bands that maybe people don't know as much. I could talk about the Stones and Led Zeppelin and all that stuff all day. But it's been talked about a million times. Not that it's not interesting, but it's just you can go anywhere and see that. So I try to think like, where are you going to hear something about Lou Reed's Street Hassle, like a making of that.
No,
I wanted to be different, and you kind of, you definitely agreed with me, I think.
Yeah. But it's a different kind of show. We actually talk about that. We talk about the different possibility and how this album changed or what you think about the album. And you know what, music is music, but it's put out there so you can enjoy, talk about it. And some of these albums that we talk about, you know what, they changed the world. From Miles Davis, from Sunrise. All these people were people that were innovators, people that changed the sound to the point you're like, wow, this is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Even when we talked about what was the guy with Zeppelin, with Frank Zappa?
Frank Zappa?
Yeah, what was that? Captain Beefheart?
Captain Beefheart, right.
Yeah, we talk about how many people we even talk about that? Like nobody now.
Nobody's talking about that. And I've tried to turn people on to some stuff that I like, because my interests are always very eclectic. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a basis in a lot of punk rock, but not just that. Okay, and I mean that Captain Beefheart show we did last year was, I think it was one of the best shows we did. And what I was so surprised is you were really excited. Like you didn't know much about him. You didn't know much about him, but you got into it just by doing the research. And I think, and that happens to me sometimes too. I like when that happens.
Because that was good. There've been a lot of bands like that we've done, and I sit there and I'm like, holy shit! Like, you know what's the one thing I never realized how bad that the Kiss rock opera album was. That was
The Elder.
Shit. Oh my god! I'm like,
we talked about that when we were doing a review of the Kistery, right? Was it Kistery, the documentary?
Yeah, what were they smoking when they did this?
They don't smoke anything. They're like sober. So I know, not Ace, but Gene and Paul. They don't really do anything.
What were they doing? What were they thinking when they did
that? I don't know, but even Paul
idea.
Stanley, when he saw the mural, okay, or the, what do you call it, the billboard, after the album, they're like, oh God, what did I do? But listen, there's people that love that record. I've met Kiss fans that love that record, and okay, it has its own life, But that's what's great about bands, is you could talk about bands all day, and there's always somebody that goes, I don't agree with that, or that's not true. Or you could have in-depth conversations, okay?
The show with the Sisters of Mercy was good.
That was a lumped up show. We were all together. We were all lumped up at Scotty's place, and we just. I mean, did we review them or did we shit on them? What did we do?
We did a bunch of shit. It might have been a review and shit on show.
There was some people on the YouTube channel that commented, and it was like, that was funny, And maybe Andrew will see this, and I'm like, yeah, he's probably going to kill us, man.
I'm gonna lump those guys up.
Yeah, we're gonna go to New York and find these fucking guys. How hard would it be to find us? If we were going to get assassinated, they'd know just where to fucking find us.
They could find a blind man. Take us out.
A blind man could, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Where
are these guys? I know where they're at. I know exactly where they're at.
What's funny is I went back not too long ago, a couple months ago, and I listened to some of the very first shows we did. When we didn't do video, and we were just doing audio, and it was on Anchor FM, and it was me and you in the bar on Sunday morning, and you were actually working, and there wasn't that many people, so you could talk. And we sound like little kids, man. It's like we're just figuring it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, we were good. And it's not much different now, but I think I'm better at telling it, you know, and I think you're better at everything. You know, all the technology and you know, your inputs are a lot better too. We just got good at it.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
that's what happened when you, after 150 shows, you should be good at something.
you should be better. Yeah, well, something's wrong.
Well,
You know,
wrong, so we get
and I always I find it amazing when, you know, and not amazing like we don't deserve it, but amazing that people in other podcasts will listen to us and they're just like, you guys are fucking great what you do.
Yeah,
You know, it's such like an honor, you know.
Yeah.
To me, you know.
It's like, holy shit, we're doing something right. And sometimes when we hit those charts, I'm like amazed sometimes. What do you mean with what? And I just I got to do a double take. What? Who the hell is it?
Yeah. Wow.
We always get that little spike. Boom, boom, boom. It's crazy.
Yep.
Hey, but it's the world. So
I know.
Hopefully to the next 150 more rock shows.
We got it's endless, man. There's no cap on this.
And we also with rock show and the conspiracy show. You know what's funny? When I look at all the shows I've done, and I look at Apple, with all the shows I've done with you and John and everybody, we're up to like a freaking 400 something episode.
If you add them all up, yeah.
Yeah, if anybody look for an icon, they'll be like, holy shit, these guys got a...
I think that's what keeps everybody interested. There's a lot of choices. You know, you could look at different things. The rock show is always different every week. And conspiracy shows, we go off on, God, we could go on tangents. You know? and this year, I'm glad we're emphasizing the conspiracy show a little more.
Yeah, we're gonna do an solid episode. We got the if you guys know, we go listen to the Giants episode. It's an epic solid 3 parts of Giants in America or Giants in the Bible, Giants just in history alone. And we did 3 episodes there.
The Caldenaro stuff, the Son of Sam stuff. Okay, you know, and that's going to be a series, and you know, looking forward to that, and getting some information out there on that topic. So I guess we want to sign off. Thank everybody. Thank everybody again. I appreciate everything, all the fans and all you listeners and everything that's helped us through these 150 rock shows. If you're looking for me, I'm on Instagram, RockerMike212. I'm also on Facebook under RockoMike because they still will not allow me to be RockerMike. I'm RockoMike. And then Rocko. And then you can find me on the Rock Show podcast group page. A lot of activity there. I'm also on Clout Hub and MeWe as RockerMike. Where can we find you, Mr. Rossi?
And you can find me in anything lumped up. If you look up the handle lumped up, it'll come up right away, especially on Hulu especially on Google or Safari. Any place you pop up, you put in the thing Getting Lumped Up and it pops up. So I'm also on Spotify, Apple iPod. We're also on iHeartRadio, Pandora. We're almost on every platform. Yeah, any platform you look at us, you can find us. And our main home is pretty much Spotify and Anchor. Those are our carrier. Those are the guys that distribute the show to everybody else. And pretty much I got to give a big thank you to Anchor for helping us support it and be able to make the technology free so we can put it out there for people.
And don't forget the YouTube channel, Getting Lumped Up. Okay, you'll see Rob Rossi's head and Obama swirl. And you just sign up, subscribe, hit like, comment, watch all the shows.
I recently was able to take the Getting Lumped Up. So when you go on YouTube, you can actually put Getting Lumped Up.
And you'll get right to it.
Straight to it. It's no more than other link. It's down.
Right.
So I just did that. So there's a lot of stuff happening with the channel, with the stuff. And guys, thank you. And we'll see you next week. And remember, always, don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
We'll see you next week.
podcast you will hear. That will be music to your ears. You'll learn about bands you love or may not know. And it's only here on The Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on The Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on The Rock Show. So tell your friends and everyone you know. Let's get lumped up on The Rock Show.